Welcome back to the Matterhorn's podcast.
Cheers, mate.
Here we are. That cheers is going to be very loud. Yeah, but here we are in the Matterhorn in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Can you give us a brief overview of what we've just done, Alex?
Well, we just hiked 7 days, about 100k.
Yes.
And that's not only just the only accomplishment we just did, but we did that off the back of a 7-day music festival, which in hindsight is a bit of a questionable decision.
Yes, very questionable.
And before that, we did another 5-day hike to the Dolomites,
In
which
Italy.
wasn't questionable. It was actually beautiful.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
I mean,
But,
depleting your serotonin as much as we did before such a rigorous mental exercise.
Yeah.
You know, live and learn.
Yeah, but that's it. Look, we're all about the challenges, aren't we? So to give a little bit of context, we've been releasing Metamine's episodes for the last kind of couple of weeks. They've all been pre-recorded, and I have been traveling around through Canada and also Europe and been waiting for the right time to do a podcast. And here we're with Alex, which is our very first podcast guest, Alex Tarry. You may remember from episode, I don't even know, maybe 5, was it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to do another one just because the environment is absolutely beautiful, and we've gone through a whole lot of interesting experiences in the last couple of weeks, which one can definitely learn from. A lot of challenges, which may not be as challenging for yourself because you've done quite a lot of multi-day hikes. But for myself, I did a 3-day hike in Canada last year, and then a 5-day hike, which was the Dolomites a week and a half ago, and now this one, which is an 8-day hike. And so how many multi-day hikes have you done?
If you go multi-day, like over one night, then I'd say 20.
Oh, gosh.
But if you're talking like over sort of 3 to 4 nights and maybe more around 8 or 9,
Yeah.
they are from my personal experience, I'd say probably the most powerful, like introspective experiences you can have, because you get yourself into many places, especially when you got, 20, we were lucky here that we had refugios like this beautiful place we're sitting right now,
Yes.
which you can't see behind us, but we get catered to tonight, and we get dinner and breakfast provided for us, and we get to drink delicious beer.
And a bed.
And a bed
You don't have
and
to bring a sleep in
linen.
the bag, yeah.
Whereas other hikes I've done where you have to carry everything, 7 days worth of food with you from the start, and water is scarce and so forth. But yeah, they're just incredibly dynamic experiences when you get yourself into questionable headspaces, but there's no distraction. There's no, I'm just going to chill for the rest of the day. You still got to, and it's not even like you got to keep going. It's like you got to, oh yeah, sorry. The hardest part is yet to come, and you got to now slog up the last 4K of a 20K day with 2,000 meters of elevation.
With 20 kilo pack on your back.
And
After 5 days of
in
hiking.
reality, and this is actually not an exaggeration,
Going to the table.
and it's not exaggeration, is you're one step away from certain death.
Absolutely. And that's the part of the scariest part, really, is that's part of the mental challenge, really, is there's so many times where it's you just look down and you're don't look down, because literally one wrong slip for 50 to 70% of that hike 2 days ago that we did, which was 16 to 18 Ks in total and 2,000 meters of elevation, as you just said, the pack on the back after 5 days of hiking. That was the most challenging day of my life, both physically and emotionally. And today it was a cruisy 10 kilometers just up from Zermatt, which is in Switzerland, if we haven't mentioned that.
This is where we're sitting.
Yes, and my legs are so sore that even today was quite challenging, even though it was very cruisy, But to dive deep quickly here, we had so many very dank and deep chats on the hike where you just kind of, you've got your earphones in, you listen to a podcast on music or something. There was 6 of us for the most part of the hikes, right? And, you had different chats with different people on different days. And then there was that one day that we thought our friend fell off the cliff and died, and we almost called a helicopter. But that's a story for another time. But again, that really showed, emotionally kind of where we were at, because we all kind of had a bit of a breakdown that day. But yes, that's a story for another time. It was an intense day. Some of the chats that we had, it's interesting. You mentioned before that it's say you're hiking for 8 hours every single day, right? You have little breaks, and you're definitely having chats in between, but the whole time you've got really nothing to do but walk, right? So what are you doing? You're ruminating.
That's it.
You're just in your head thinking,
You're sitting there, and
it's a meditation exercise.
The more your muscles or the more your mind fatigues, the nature or the trail around you doesn't really forgive in the world we live in today, like you can be quite forgiving in whatever way you want, whether it's going and getting, some McDonald's like we did yesterday and heavily regretted mere moments afterwards, or whether it's going and spending time inside, or just taking comfort in a certain friend. You don't really get that option. Like, for anyone who's listening, who's been to, anything from a music festival to having a relationship, the longer you spend consistently with a person, the more walls and barriers break down. And when you've got six, in this case, you've got six guys all doing this hike together, quite powerful characters. You're going to have these constant ego clashes and these constant things that go through your head, and people that press your buttons when you really don't need them to be pressed. And
especially us. We're always pressing each other's buttons, but it's interesting when you're in a position of that hike where there's such intensity happening during the whole day, that a joking press of the buttons between friends becomes like very, agitated very quickly, because there's, so much energy going into what you're doing that day, basically. Continue your thought though.
Yeah, but that's it. It's just you're breaking barriers down between people, and one thing that we're fortunate with the people we have here, and I'm sure it's with a lot of people, but we have these big egotistical clashes, but then it can be a mere matter of whether it's 5 minutes or half an hour. You have to move forward, because you don't get to separate yourself from someone. You don't get to like have that space to reflect. So you sort of, one thing that's good with the hiking here is people set their own paces, and on the first or second day, you stay as a group, but as the hike progresses, you start to go at your own pace, which, as Aimon said, you start to go into little pairs, say, and you have different conversations. Like Aimon and I had one or two very deep conversations certain days, but then, my brother and I had tension growing, and then one day we charged ahead, and because it's just us two without anyone else, we get to vent it, and you get to see what each other's properly thinking. It's amazing seeing, for myself, who's done a lot of these things, especially for Aimon, but even for my brother in this particular hike, watching me say something to him which I think is influential, and watching him sort of neglect it in that moment. And then 24 to 48 hours later, rather than having procrastinations and rather than having friends around you and work to go to and all these things to consume your mind, all he has to do is think on these points.
Yeah.
And it's interesting watching this whole change go through, and then like the attitude of someone when you say something to them, and then 48 hours later, you're walking and they come to you and they say something, you're like, I forgot about this.
Yes.
Like, clearly this has been in your head over the past 42 kilometers.
Because there's nothing else to do but think.
There's nothing else to do.
And that happened to us a few times as well, where you just kind of catch up to me with your hiking poles, and you're like, so what about this? And you ask me a question about something that we were talking about, 2 days prior. And I just scream profanities on the hike, because I'm like, Alex, why do you challenge me so much like this? Which is great, and it's awesome to do hikes like this with friends that you can, say things openly to and challenge each other to. But I suppose like the core of what we're getting at here is that, it all comes down to ego, and this is part of the conversation that we've chatted about so much over the last few days, is that your ego identifies with thoughts, so you have a thought and then that thought is amplified because you have many thoughts on that topic, and whether they're correct or not correct, your ego identifies with particular thoughts in that topic, because it thinks it's right, because that's the brain's job, to have thoughts about its environment and to protect you. Ultimately, it just so happens that in this day and age, we don't really have much need to be protected, because we're quite safe and civil as humans, generally speaking. And but yeah, so instead our ego just makes up thoughts about our environments. It's like, why does Alex hate me, or whatever, Not that I had that thought, but I did, openly chat to you about how, like one of your pokes at me for like a good couple of hours there. I was ruminating, and I was like, I can't believe that guy. He's such a dick. Like, why did he say that thing? And I was, beating you down, and like imagining experiences coming up, like, acting and like role playing this idea of what I would say in a situation where you might say another thing. And then, 2 hours in, I'm like, what am I even thinking about? This person is one of my best friends, and he jokingly said a thing to me a few hours ago, and just because I've been hiking for 5 days and I'm tired and been doing this, it's like it's all just made up, and your mind just makes all of these things up. And this is why hiking is a great way to push yourself, because it's it's a meditation, as you said, and
well, that's it. And it's
time to think.
I think it's very easy nowadays to seek comfort in your own thoughts. You know, you have a thought and it's quite easy to seek comfort in that and you can do what you like. But when you get put in a situation where you get constantly pressed and you're at this point where you're agitated and then someone says something and you don't have the ability to go and, you know, seek comfort, whether it's online or however you look at it, forums or whatever, you know, you don't get to go and go like, yeah, that's right, that's it. You sort of have these clashes and it's with people that are very close to you. And so you know that they're not doing something like intentionally to hurt you. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting. It's very interesting when you do something like one of the points we were talking about coming into this podcast is, you know, challenging yourself and putting yourself in places where...
Yeah, we haven't actually framed that up yet.
Yeah, well, it's the concept coming into this podcast was like how things that challenge you. And for me personally, like in, you know, here's the toot of my own horn, this hike wasn't as difficult as prior hikes for me. I've been on a hike where my knees gave out and we were 50, 60 Ks from the finish line and the only route out is a helicopter. So my brother carried my pack for 60 to 70% of that. He had two 25, 30 kilo packs,
gosh.
one on his front and one on his back, and I could only walk sideways because my knees were in such agony. It's yeah, like things happen and it's just ridiculous. But the challenges you can put yourself in, whether it is as simple as, you know, stop procrastinating, do this written work for your job, or whether it's, you know, going to gym and putting yourself through obviously pain when you're straining your muscles, but something like, you know, the concept of challenging yourself and what we say with hiking in this particular situation is like, there are very few situations you can put yourself in where for 7 days straight, all you do is walk and not walking flat. You're walking up serious terrain, like very serious terrain. Walk, sleep, eat, and there's not much in between that. So there's not much time to go and be by yourself. There's pretty much no time to go be by yourself.
Yeah.
It's a incredibly unique and dynamic and introspective experience. I've read people like Djokovic, the tennis player, who, you know, fell out of love with tennis and was in a serious state of disarray, and he said hiking through the mountains is something that reinvigorated his love for tennis and like his love for himself and so forth. And Aim, I think for myself in this trip, is one person that I've seen like massive changes. And like you said before, you know, I'm very well known for pushing buttons, and you know, there's certain things we
That's
have.
why I love you, but also why I hate you. You push me, but for that reason I have to grow.
and it goes both ways, and it's something we treasure about each other. But that's it. Is like, you know, I've learned a lot about this man in the past few years, and so certain things where might conflict with my own thought processes, instead of, you know, seeing each other for a couple hours over beers and joking about the weather and freaking stupid political crap, you really get to points, and it gets to points where, you know, before I'll say something, I'll be like, you know, do you want to dive here because I don't want to mess with something? But then you dive into just like seriously things that people like neglect for years.
Yeah, deep psychological
years and
trauma,
years and
okay.
years. And today was a prime example. Was it today or yesterday was a prime example of it's what we were saying, screaming profanities before. Like, I had this thought, and I can say with truth, like, there's very, very little situations I would ever confront Aimon on this thought. But you know, if I was like, you know what, and I just pushed and I hammered through to catch Aimon, you know, 600 meters ahead of me. And I was like, do you want to do this? And he's like, yeah. So I asked him, and straight away, it's just like, you know, profanities.
Yes.
Why?
Then we
why do you do this?
But for context, though, so the day before was the hardest day of the hike after 5 days of hiking. And that was the thing that pushed me to the limits. And as you saw, within the last 30 meters, you know, for the last, what was it, like a kilometer, it was essentially like this, you know, and we had no expectation of that coming. So my expectations weren't managed.
And just to intervene there, as you know, as we're just talking about my hiking experience, the terrain we faced 2 days ago was without doubt the most difficult and most instantaneous death or not death terrain I've ever faced in my life.
Yeah.
And that is me coming into it being very sure-footed with a light pack. Whereas Aimon and Josh, who we had to deal with serious vertigo, which is, you know, something not to be joked about. He's a very confident snowboarder who can do things that I couldn't dream of doing, and is an incredibly outgoing man. But when it comes to a situation where you are like mere meters from death,
again, your mind is just trying to protect you, but for some reason, vertigo is what it does.
And so in that situation, you know, I had to constantly have my arm on the outside of him, and you're you're very calmly trying to keep that man stable in that present situation. And it's just very interesting hearing these things.
But yeah, so to continue that,
Sorry.
it's like on that day, that was obviously the hardest day, and that was the day that I was doing a lot of ruminating, battling with my own ego in my own head for hours and hours and hours on various different topics, basically. And I'm so glad that I had someone to bounce these things off of, someone that is emotionally intelligent, that can, reflect on these different things, even though it's like so funny. All you need to do is actually sometimes just say the things out loud, and that person doesn't even actually have to say anything for you to realize what the answer is. You know what I mean? But regardless, the conversations we were having were the day after that. And on that day, it was about 50 meters from the cabin after about a kilometer of this, which we had no expectation existed. After
It looked like you were climbing a wall.
gnarly switchbacks, yeah. And my friend over here, George, who organized the whole
There's a couple friends
hike,
that are
basically,
over there.
he, everything's quite easy for him. He's well versed in hiking, and yeah, so it was my birthday, and he didn't say happy birthday the entire day until that moment. And the way he said it just broke me to tears, and I just broke down, man, and I cried. And it was only you and your brother actually that kind of saw that. I'm glad you were there to hug me. You're like, you just did it, man. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And the thing is, it's funny because it wasn't even that physically challenging, like I did it and I was like okay to do it. It was partly the expectation thing, it's like not expecting the next like 2 hours to be uphill, and then these things coming out of nowhere. So managing expectations is a big thing for me, whereas you say it's okay, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and keep hiking. And they're two very different perspectives that can get to the same goal.
That's it.
And you can take part of either of them depending on the situation that you're in. But yeah, it was the day after that all of this rumination and reflecting that I had, that we had these much deeper conversations where the terrain was much easier after we hiked through that first hour of cloudy scariness. And yeah, anyway, basically to bring it back again, because I haven't fully framed the full point of this podcast, is that you have to challenge yourself to grow. It's really, really simple, and everybody knows it. And as you said, you can do it in simple ways from, from home today to the bus stop. If it's a 5-minute walk, I'm going to run with my bag and in my work clothes, whatever it is, just all these tiny little things that you can do. But then in the larger scale, I've found, and I'm sure you can agree, that when you set out on, and again, we didn't plan this thing. This lovely gentleman over here decided to drag us into this, basically. Like when you do something that's much more massive to challenge yourself, that's perhaps more over a longer period of time, that's when you can grow the most and really see deeper into who you are and manage your own ego, or at least observe your own ego. And it's interesting. Do you have anything to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, it's the consistency. It's the thing. It's the consistency of being pushed and pressured. It's things that you don't get to do very often in life. And it's so, especially as we get more and more technologically advanced, it's so easy to just like constantly play into the comfort zone. And something like this, or even something, whether it's pursuing, like I'm personally quite physically active, so sports are a huge thing for me, but it's putting yourself through something that you can't get out of even if you choose to. And that's where you really start to break down the walls. There's a certain amount of discipline which comes to things when you do it, and you're disciplined enough to keep doing it, and you're disciplined enough to keep persevering. But at any point you can exit. It's a whole different ball game when
Yes.
you can't exit.
Yes.
That's the whole gist. And that's why, in particular, this scenario, which is like, I don't want to say the only way you can achieve these things is through a hike, but when you put yourself in these situations, as like I referred to before with my knee situation in Glacier National Park, you can only get out via helicopter. There is no other route. And we were this close to calling a helicopter. And with our friend Lachlan the other day, we actually did call a helicopter, and we were mere minutes off 15 to 20,000 francs, which is 30,000 Australian dollars, because we thought something catastrophic and cataclysmic had happened. And this hike,
Simply because we didn't keep an eye on him for 5
and
minutes.
that's it. And you trivialize
Silly.
all these simple safety measures that you get to, and it's only you learn via experience. And in this situation, like this hike has been slightly more easy for me, except I had 30 minutes the hardest emotional stress I've ever been through in my entire life. And so I don't know, yeah, back to that point, it's putting yourself in a situation where you can't escape at will is a very, 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 very different thing to disciplinary action and going for it. I'm not trying to discredit disciplinary action, but when you can't exit, you are forced to face parts of yourself that you might not have been able to force to face unless you have like incredible discipline.
Yeah.
And that's something which is
and that's the thing,
incomparable. Yeah.
That's the thing. So there's like at least 3 times on this like journey. You know, Dolomites was like a little bit high, but nothing in comparison to this. There's been at least a few times where I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. I need to like. I'm going to bust to the next town right now. But oh wait, I'm 3,000 meters above sea level. I can hardly catch my breath, and I'm 7 kilometers from everything else. So unless I want to pay $30,000 for a helicopter right now and just be, and just bitch out of this experience, then like that's it. Like move forward or nothing, or jump off the cliff and die. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's a small blip a couple of days ago where I was like, my legs were just sore and I was tired and I wasn't sleeping well. And then, I was in my head a bit, but then purely from experience, there's only something from experience. And I actually said the words to Aimon, I've been to hell and back, and therefore I am now able to persevere here. But Aimon and I were both in our head and we resonated on that wavelength for a bit. But then I managed to objectify the self and realize that negative emotions is not going to help me get to that point. And if anything, definitely if anything, it's going to make it harder. And he said, I just don't want to be here, or not that, but, I'm so done right now. Yeah. And without thinking, which is another version of that, you can't escape. And especially being around people for such a long period of time, you lose the ability to retain your inhibitions. And I just looked straight at him. I was like, I don't want to swear, but don't be negative. It's not going to change anything. Shut up, basically. And as soon as I walk away, I go like, that was pretty rude. But it was what I was trying to push across, and I guess it was in a blunt form. And that's why, I don't know. It's a hard one. But pushing, there's so many moments where you say things and then you realize it, but you wouldn't have ever said those things if you were in social situations, because, when you're done, what do? You call a cab, you go home. Or you just say, I'll talk to you later, man.
Yeah,
or you
everything just avoid you can just escape. You'd be
it's just easy to escape.
This situation is making me mildly uncomfortable. I'm going to tap out and leave, basically.
And facing those parts of you, I think for me, is essential to growing as a person. And I think it is far, far too easy in our present day society, especially coming from the ultimate first world problem people sitting here right now.
Yeah.
My granny used to always say to me and stuff, in the war we didn't have time to be depressed, and that doesn't mean that depression didn't exist. It just means, there were, I keep going to say quintessential, but there are like essential things that needed to be done, necessities that needed to be done. So your emotions, which is what happens in a hike, your emotions have to be accepted and move forward to be able to do the things that, will essentially keep you alive. You can't, when you're, as Aimon was saying, that kilometer where, not him, but Josh and a few people were like really, really at the end of their tether, but your life is in danger at that point. You even at the end of your tether, you need to stay focused, keep your posture, and stay walking, because if you start getting lazy,
focus on every step,
which is what we worried about with our friend Lachlan, is he's always had issues with his feet. He's always had issues with his feet. And that's what made it easier for us to believe that maybe something catastrophic had happened.
But he just took the wrong path.
Sorry, let's clear this up. He took it. He bush bashed down some rocks and took a wrong path. And he was having a great time. And we five other gentlemen. I'm pretty sure every gentleman had tears, more bald than others. Others were in things. This is traumatizing. It's not traumatizing because he was okay, but for 30 minutes there, we were all in heavy states of trauma.
So I'm just gonna cut you off there because we have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, we only have a couple. Fair.
So just to hit home on that point there, because you just
push yourself.
You do ramble a lot, and you hit on 15 different points.
Yeah,
that's partly why
DJ tangent.
That's it. But what you were saying with the thing where you called me out, a lot of different people may not be able to handle that, or in that particular way. You said you might not say that in a particular social situation, just having beers with friends or whatever, but in that moment, there was a second there where my ego jumped into defense mode, and I was like, why did you say that? I can't believe whatever it said, but it jumped into defense mode basically. And then as you walked away on the largest suspension bridge in the world, might I just flex there for a little bit? Very, very cool. I kind of came to and realized that you're absolutely right, you know. And this goes back to whatever it is.
Comes back to
episode 2.
you can't escape it. That's
Perception is reality, you know. And so if I'm hiking for kilometers and kilometers, being like, I hate this, I can't do this, this is hard, I'm sad, whatever, and then you come along and it's like, one step at a time, dude. You can't do it. Like, change your attitude, because like that's all that matters right now. And then all of a sudden, you have
to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's it.
Why make it such a negative experience?
Yeah, and so you may as well just go, okay, it's fine, one step at a time, or at least observe every thought that comes into your mind, and if it's not useful to you, allow it to pass, which is meditation.
Essentially meditation.
Which is why hiking is so good, because it's hours and hours of not actual practice of meditation. But hours and hours, days and days of hours and hours of thoughts popping into your mind, and you allowing you to actually, first of all, battle with them, but then realize that you're battling with them, take a step back and observe what you're actually doing, basically, realize what's useful, realize what's not,
And sometimes you have to feed into those negativities to realize what they are, and sometimes you're privileged to have people around you that can, help you with those things.
Yeah.
But like, that's where it comes back to the framing of the whole podcast, which is like, and it's one of my friends, which Aimon knows, Aaron, has Sikh discomfort on his back, and he was in Timor for a few years in army, and I assume he went into situations which are exactly the same, comparable to what we're doing here, where you can't escape and you don't want to be there, and it's purely a choice of, do I want to be here and be negative?
It's probably a little bit more intense than what we're doing, to be honest.
Yes, for sure. But it comes down to like, do I want to be negative about where I am, or do I want to be positive about where I am?
Yes.
And sometimes you have to be negative to realize what you're doing, to objectify it.
Everything.
And putting yourself into strainful situations is something which, more or less, I would never wish upon my friends what happened to me in Glacier National Park with my knees. However, it has made challenges of life which would be insurmountable seem doable, purely because you've been to places that. And so basically push yourself to places you don't think you could go, because everyone can go there, and I'm sure it might not be a great time at that point. It won't be a great time at that point.
Yeah.
But I look back on a video that our friend over there has, and I see my knees and I go, ha, and I laugh at it now. And I was in agony then, but it's something that builds character. And that's going to be
so a few more points to wrap up is, I guess, like, one thing is like, our version of pushing yourself might not be your version of pushing yourself. Our version of pushing yourself is doing an 8-day hike, which we have one more day tomorrow. Thank God it's all downhill, but still 14
And then
kilometers.
the Rugby World Cup.
Yes, which I'm super stoked for.
I am.
Our version of pushing yourself is an 8-day hike, and your version of pushing yourself, as I said, might be running to the bus stop each morning, or might be meditating every single day for 10 minutes, regardless of, waiting until the timer goes up. You don't have to push yourself on this large scale, although obviously when you do that and go so far out of your comfort zone, that's where the magic happens, and that's where you're going to get the most growth out of it. But, like when you're, even small versions of day-to-day, if you're in the routine, if you're in the habit, but even travel in itself, in its own right, is a very consciousness opening and expanding experience that you can learn from every day.
So it doesn't have to be a 7-day hike, but sort of what you're saying right there, to put into a quick sentence, is like the idea of, I hate this, as opposed to one step at a time, is you don't have to do a 7-day hike. Do a 1-night hike, then a 3-night hike.
Yes.
And whether it's 1-night hike or 7-day hike or a 14-day mountaineering experience, you're still putting one foot in front of the other. That's the thing.
Yes,
You're putting one foot in front of the other. And so it's be present, feel your body stretch, feel your body pain, accept that body pain and work through it, and don't just live up in here.
Yes.
Live here.
And this is the thing, is like in this current society, everyone has a higher frequency of thoughts than people did, like your nana in the war, like however many years ago. So those high frequency of thoughts have much more time for you to ruminate on different things, and they're going to be much more like menial things that aren't as important, basically, but they are as important because it's all relative. But to hit on the point that you've been kind of saying without actually saying the actual point is that, whether your attitude is I hate this and I want to die, or I love this and it's the best thing I've ever done, you have the ability to choose.
And the outcome's the same.
The outcome
Most of the time.
The outcome is the same, but the outcome is based on your perception and what you choose to perceive, So I feel like I'm really enjoying myself, or whatever it is. And again, this is an ego battle. And this is the thoughts that you are in control of, or are in control to choose what you keep or what you discard. Everything's an ego battle. We've got about 30 seconds, man. What do you want to say?
Well, basically, like, if you know, as again, I'm physical, so it's like when you're exercising and it's hard, you can think this is building me, or I don't want to do this right now.
Yeah.
When you're eating, you know, a tub of ice cream, you can be like, I love this, or you know, it's not really doing me any good. Doesn't mean don't enjoy the ice cream. Doesn't mean the pain doesn't hurt, but it means like accept them for both for what they are, and
I
realize.
think we've run out of time. So
Okay, have fun.
thanks, man.
It's been
been
sweet.
good.
We're gonna drink more beers. Great times.